Lots of you guys have asked for this, and I'm pleased to announce we are finally going to build across the bay. We're going to start to build Oakland. So welcome guys back to episode 16 of San Francisco. This is an area that I've pretty much neglected up until now because I wanted to get the bulk of San Francisco, or at least a good part of it, up and running before I came across here. So the first thing I really want to build here is a toll booth, but I want to show you guys on Google Earth, or at least for the people that don't know the area, what this area looks like, what it is I'm building, and how it is I'm laying it out. And here it is in all its glory. Now, I'm not copying this one for one. I'm just going to take the main gist of the area and really just do my best to build it in city skylines. So looking at this area objectively, we've got the highway running through here that runs through the toll booth. There's also a pretty complicated intersection here that runs into Oakland. And we've also got this really cool like little bit of nature or beach here next to the highway. It includes some black sand areas and these really cool looking sort of old abandoned, or maybe they're not abandoned, like aerials. Well, it feels pretty good to be building here across the bay, but I gotta say that I wasn't really ready to do this for, I don't know, in my head it was a lot longer than what's happening here. I kinda wanted to get most of the San Francisco area, like the whole peninsula, built out right over to the beach, sorta towards the San Francisco Zoo, but I have massively underestimated how much work is involved in getting that done. Well, at least to the standard that I think it should be, or, you know, to the standard that I think you guys deserve. And as dedicated as I was to that, I think it's really time to cross the bay here and start diversifying our city a little bit, or our series. And it also kind of keeps it fresh for me. I was getting stuck in a bit of a hole thinking that I had to finish that whole peninsula first before I could really branch out and do anything different like this. I've kind of had a thought in my head as to how the series would progress, so this area, then that area, then that area, for lack of a better way of explaining. But I'm gonna sort of jump my own gun here a little bit and shoot across the bay because I'm pretty desperate to do this and lots of you guys have asked for it. It's really going to help with our city and game as well. We are going to add some pretty vital things to make our city run within game, but we will be getting to that a little bit later. First things first, there's a couple of really complicated intersections where we enter Oakland here. The first one that we're working on here enters into Oakland here and flows over towards an industrial area and then goes a little bit further into like a neighborhood. This is pretty much the main intersection that I focus on in this episode. When we look at Google Earth and break this area down, it's quite complicated. There's like 3 or 4 different major interchanges here, but I want to take my time and get them all right. So let's just focus on this one for now. And while I remember, I'd just like to quickly mention that you guys are going to see the graphics settings or the LUT change quite a bit during this episode. I'm just a sucker for messing around with the settings and trying to get it to look a particular way during a time of the day or whatever. And maybe you guys can just pretend we're going through a normal day, you know, it changes. Sometimes we're in the sun, sometimes it's raining, sometimes it's darker or light. But to be honest, I actually love the idea of it going through different lighting because I think that's pretty realistic, or it's pretty normal. Some days are brighter than others and vice versa. I would think that's kind of pretty normal, but I guess you guys are going to ultimately tell me whether that's cool or not in the comments. But please, go easy on me. Anyway, we need to get all of this roading set up before we can really start building here. I'm a sucker for getting all the infrastructure in place before we build anything of importance. And even though this interchange isn't being built one for one or like the real life model, I am still going to follow the principle that this interchange lays out. And my god, intersections aren't my thing, or interchanges, so wish me luck. Where I come from here in New Zealand, we don't have many of these toll booths at all. I think there may be a couple in Auckland and maybe elsewhere, I'm not sure, but we don't have many at all. But there's something about them that's just really cool. I like how the traffic sort of whizzes through them or whatever, and they just look really cool within game. Whilst I was building the other toll booth that's nearer the Golden Gate Bridge, I found this cool little trick where we can take these vanilla toll booths that were in one of the DLCs, I can't remember exactly which one, but we can take these and turn them to procedural objects, and we're left with basically just the little shelter bit, and this means that we can manipulate that further with procedural objects, make it bigger, smaller, move the pillars, and really customize it to suit our new roads that we've made here. I do realise that I could have made probably a better one if I'd used different props or whatever in procedural objects and made like a fully custom one from scratch, but going way too hardcore on these areas has already been the downfall of one of my previous series. So I've got to be very careful to balance detail versus scale. You know, that old battle, that old chestnut. I want this series in City to go for a lot longer than it's gone for, and to do that I need to really back off, and that's hard for me to do. Luckily I have other series where I put down stupidly absurd amounts of props to satisfy my uncontrollable urge for detail. But yeah, I guess long story short, I want this to be a massive city. I want it really big, so ease up on the props, eh? Anyway, here's me smashing a whole bunch of props down and completely going against everything I just said. You can see there's a lovely little twirly decal and a crack there that looks pretty real. I may seriously need help. In all seriousness, I am learning where to draw the line, but I am finding it difficult. And this kind of is on the light side, details wise for me. And I guess I also have to be mindful that the rest of the city has a fair amount of detail in strategic places as well, and I don't just want one part of the city to all of a sudden have no detail. I'm also heavily relying on the fact that when I change props to procedural objects, they do not count towards that overall prop count, so I don't have to worry about hitting that in this series. There's some pretty cool and unique things that we're going to build next on this side of the toll booth road. They've got these like antennas, or I tried to research what these are for and I just couldn't find anything, but we can see it juts out with a little peninsula here. There's a couple of broken concrete walls or brick walls around, and of course those sort of antennas that are there. I'm also going to add a old degenerate car park in here as well. So I've got the land all shaped with the little peninsula. I've put these brick wall networks down, and you can also see that I extend a road out here, but these roads are pretty much fake. They're not plumbed into the actual roading network. Then I want to add heaps of scrub and stuff down where it meets the beach. I want this to look sort of untamed right here next to the road. And I have to say, I'm quite proud of myself. It looks like I'm putting lots of props down, but really all I'm doing is a few bits of grass here and there, some rocks and a handful of decals, just to try and show the neglected nature of this car park. Maybe it's still in use, but maybe there's only one person working here now where there used to be many. Next is to finish the area off with these antennas. I'm pretty sure this is just the vanilla radio mast. Turn to procedural objects, of course, so I can rescale it, plumb it into the ground here, it's sort of approximately where it goes, and then just put a concrete base around it with an appropriate walkway so it can be accessed for maintenance. I've tried to keep that as simple as I can, but the whole area I think looks really cool and quite interesting. You may also notice here that I've only got 2 masts here, whereas in real life there's 3. Just want to go with that whole downscaling a little wee bit. We're also going to add more of these very shortly, so I didn't want to overdo it. We have some momentum, we are well and truly on a roll here with these peninsulas, so let's carry on. This one's a bit bigger and pretty unique in a few different ways. Now we can switch over to the other side of the toll booth road and start focusing on setting up a port area here. This of course is what we see in real life, and having a look on good old Google Earth here, we can see this particular part here is pretty run down, it's pretty worn out, so we're going to follow that model. It's also got some train lines running in here if you look really closely. So the first thing I'll need to do in game is set up a dock edge and also a surface that we can build on. Try and level all of that out with the terrain, and that gives us a nice starting point to start building from. I'll also very quickly put those train lines in and also run a road down here that's going to be usable. Then we are finally ready to start building. This does take a fair bit of time, but I've learnt that it's much easier to get this right at the start than try and fix it at the end. So guys, I stuffed up a little bit of the footage and I couldn't really figure it out until I had edited the first draft, but we're going back in time here and doing a little wee bit that I was supposed to do before we did the last bit. Does that make any sense? I even had this like really grand like idea in my mind of having this shot come in from across the bridge, and it was going to go after this section here, and yeah, I stuffed it all up. And here we are going back in time a little bit. I know, please email me with your concerns, I will endeavour to get to them. In any case, we've caught the DeLorean and we are back in the present time here. And finally, we're putting some buildings down. We're going to start with the really obvious one here as well, this big, long, white shed. And what I've done here is I've also pulled a road right through it, in one door and out the other door. We're going to put some real industry buildings in here so that you don't see them, and we're going to have real traffic look like it's going in one door and out the other. I really love creating these types of areas, but what I really love is being able to animate them, whether that's with people or with traffic. And I just can't wait to see the first little car come through here and turn around, and I bet you it's going to be that bloody donut van. Curse that donut van. Jeez, I've really got my ramble on in this episode. Let's get back to what I'm building here. You can see we're making it really rugged. We're following that model from Google Earth. There's a few containers around here. God knows what's in them or what they're for. There's also some random piles of gravel and stuff. And one thing I noticed was there was these big patches of concrete that looked like they had been sort of damaged beyond repair and had been re-poured, but the concrete was a slightly different colour. So I'm using one of the big landscaping decals, turning it to PO so that I can resize it, and yeah, trying to make it look like there's new patches of concrete that have been poured, or at the very least repaired poorly. Then I'm going to go around and put like little wee bits of grass and stuff sticking out of some of these cracks, or where this new concrete meets the old concrete. I'm really only going to focus on adding those props in a couple of areas because of course scale versus detail, remember. Another really cool thing I like about this area is the cul-de-sac that I've made here. I've used node controller to swell the last node in the road really big, and yeah, I think that looks really cool. So anyway, that is more than enough detail for this area. The next thing I want to do is start adding those real industrial services into that building so we can get that traffic flowing through. And initially I wanted to put the buildings, or these industrial buildings, right inside the warehouse so that we couldn't see them. But a couple of these vanilla buildings, yes that's right, vanilla buildings, actually look really good half sticking out of the warehouse, especially these ones with tanks. So that's what I'm going to do here. It makes the building look a little bit more interesting, and yeah, it's going to bring real traffic through. What do you guys think about this area? Hit me up in the comments. Alright, so let's wander over to the next area and really get a move on here. I'm used to doing a lot more building than what I've done in this episode so far, and I hope you guys can forgive me because I kind of feel like I'm shortchanging here, so I want to get a move on here. We're going to extend this port area with exactly the same method we built that first section with. We're using the same dock edge from Relight 69, the same surfaces, we're lining it up with the terrain height, and it's following that real life model as close as I can get it. We've got a pretty unique like club head sort of shaped harbour here, and I kind of love the bespoke nature of it. It's not really at a right angle, it just sort of comes in and yeah, creates a shape, and I really like that. I'm digging it, man. And speaking of digging it, I'm digging these Industries DLC buildings for this port here because they are pretty sexy for vanilla buildings and they fit perfectly with our theme here. And if we get these industry buildings working correctly within game, we can make some absurd money. So I'm kind of thinking, why wouldn't we take that opportunity and try and make this area not only functional but really like a cash cow for the city. Now admittedly, I've never really understood how the industries work correctly 100%. You know, I kind of get it. You know, with the forestry for instance, you've got to have a maintenance shed or a workers barracks, and the better the working conditions, the more efficient it is, etc, etc. But I kind of know that there's way more to it than what I know. So I spent hours on YouTube looking at different tutorials on how to get better, how it all works, and I'm pleased to announce, guys, that after all of that, I'm actually probably just as bad, if not worse. So I'm pretty determined to understand how all of that Industries DLC works, so in the next episode we jump right into it and fill this port pretty much right out. I want to thank you guys so much for tuning in to this episode. I hope you've enjoyed it. Please give it the old thumbs up if you have, and I hope to see you guys in the next episode. Peace out.